2 years ago, I lived with my younger brother on the East Coast. We didn't go out much. We mainly hung out with friends or grabbed food, but rarely did anything adventurous. I started looking up activities and found that camping was a popular suggestion since we were close to the Appalachians. I mentioned it to my brother, but he didn't seem interested. A few days later, I bought some gear, including a small tent and safety tools, then packed my old backpack and drove to a nearby trail. I knew I was inexperienced and that camping alone wasn't the best idea, but I planned to be out for just one night, so I figured it would be okay. After an hour of driving, I arrived at the trailhead. No other cars were parked and I didn't see any other people. I put on my backpack and began the hike. The path was thin and poorly maintained, but it was navigable. It didn't seem to be a popular trail. I had found it by scrolling through a list and selecting one that wasn't too long. As I hiked, the trail became increasingly overgrown, making it difficult to discern the path. Yet, after an hour, I reached the campsite. As I surveyed the area, I noticed a pile of logs on the far side of the campground. Flakes of charred wood blew off in the wind, indicating it had been used recently, perhaps even the night before. However, I didn't see any tents or signs of recent campers. I set my things down and got to work on my tent. It was still early, so I took my time to ensure it was set up properly. Once I finished, I relaxed inside for a bit, enjoying the remaining hour of sunlight. As the sun began to set, I heard a crackling sound nearby, similar to that of a campfire. I unzipped my tent and stepped out, only to find a man sitting across the campsite next to the half-burnt logs. He appeared to be in his 40s. He was already looking at me, so I nervously waved. After a few seconds, he lifted his hand in response. I gathered a pile of sticks and built a small campfire. Soon it was mostly dark, with only the light from my fire and his illuminating the area. I kept glancing over, trying to see if he had a tent or a backpack, but I could only see him. He sat quietly, staring into the fire, and I grew increasingly uneasy about his presence. Where had he come from? I convinced myself that I was overthinking it. After all, it was a public camping ground. I retreated into my tent, hoping to rest. However, sleep eluded me. I lay there, listening to the faint crackling of the man's campfire. After about an hour, I heard leaves crunching as someone approached my tent. I sat up, straining to listen, and soon saw the shadow of the man standing on the other side of the fabric. My heart raced as I watched him stand there, motionless. Then, just as suddenly, he began to move away, the sound of leaves crunching fading into the distance. I quickly unzipped my tent and looked outside, but the campground was empty. The man had vanished, leaving only the smoldering logs behind. I hurriedly packed up my gear, shoving the tent into its holder and breaking some of the rods in my haste. I left without ever seeing the man return. What happened out there remains a mystery, and I still wonder what might have occurred if I had stayed longer.